Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Jett Tennis Podcast. So, I'm just going to start off by kind of going through how this show came to be because I started something a few months ago called Not My Fault Tennis. We had a pretty big following on Instagram. We had 21,000 followers on there, and I started like this little YouTube podcast kind of off that called the Not My Fault Tennis Podcast. We had Pavi G on there. He was really the only guest we had on, but we did a few episodes of that and it was fun. It didn't get much views. The YouTube just had like, 100 subscribers compared to the Instagram that had 20,000, but that was kind of the first time I was doing any type of podcast. But then the Instagram got banned for some copyright related issues, which I believe I should have got the account back, but I think I still might be able to. That could be something I'll talk about in a different video or episode if I just wanted to go into it more in depth, which I think I will. But but I thought it'd be better just kind of start fresh and kind of move off of Not My Fault Tennis. Not My Fault Tennis, the Instagram at least was very like match highlight based. I took match highlights, just any point from a match, and I'd make edits or I'd just put some music over it. And I think at the end of the day, that wasn't really a long term direction to go into. It grew really quickly. It was 20,000 in 4 months, just almost like exponential growth. It was going to keep getting bigger. I see accounts like it that are bigger, but yeah, it just wasn't a long term thing like I think a podcast like this could be. And I don't even know if this is really going to be a podcast. It's more just going to be like, I'm going to come on here and talk about whatever's going on. I'm going to do kind of clips for social media too. There should be a YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram for Jett Tennis. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So for this first episode, I wanted to, obviously, the French Open final, men's final, is tomorrow. And we've had 2 weeks of just a lot of action at the French Open. So I just wanted to go over some kind of broad topics for the French Open. I have my winners, my losers, my biggest surprises, things I got right, wrong, and then my final prediction, and then my bet for the final for anyone who wants to put some money down on it. So I'll start with winners and losers. And what I mean by winners and losers is just like, was it a successful 2 weeks for them or was it not? Like, you'll see by the people I put on here, like, what I mean by it, because I have the biggest winners. I have four of them, and I'll go one by one for that. So, Casper Ruud is the first one, and these are in no order. It's just, I think these are the four biggest winners that were in this French Open. So, Casper obviously was underestimated coming in. He had a decent clay season, I think better than last year, probably coming in, and he made the final at the French last year. But yeah, he won Barcelona. He had a couple other decent results, but then he comes here and he just knows how to win best of five set matches at the French Open. He just is very good at maneuvering through his draw, just methodically getting through. And he reached another semi. His last three French Open, it's going to be finalist, semifinalist. Like, that's elite. That's seriously elite. And it's a great result for him. I think he would have wished to beat Zverev. Maybe he could have if he didn't have that stomach issue. I think it would have been a lot more competitive, like, obviously. I think he really could have got through, but Zverev's such a tough player to beat. And I'll use that to segue into my next winner, who is Zverev. Obviously, obviously he hasn't won the tournament yet. The final's still yet to be played, but come on, man. It's hard to deny that it's been a very successful 2 weeks for him. It looked like he was down and out against Griekspoor, but he managed to get through that. And then I thought De Minaur might give him trouble because I thought Z might not have the legs in that match. And especially, it looked like he was going to lose that second set tiebreaker. I think that match could have gone very differently if he didn't come back in that tiebreaker. And it was kind of a De Minaur throwing it. I mean, Zverev, he makes you hit the shots. He did it against Griekspoor in the fifth, and he did it against De Minaur in that tiebreaker. But I think Zverev's gotten a little bit lucky off of just unclutch play from his opposition. and Casper had the physical issue, and that's going to be a part of my prediction for the final, which I'll get to later. But I mean, I give Zverev all the credit, but I think it's almost like a little Djokovic. He just makes you hit those shots, and then if you choke, you choke. But Zverev's gotten a little lucky, I think, off of other players, kind of mental and physical collapsing. Okay, next winner, Alcaraz. Obviously, he's the other finalist. I mean, if you make a Grand Slam final, it's hard not to kind of be a winner in terms of was it a successful 2 weeks or not. Alcaraz, he looked lights out, incredible in his first 5 matches, and then I'll get to this later too. I thought he was down and out against Sinner. I thought it was a repeat of the semi of last year's U.S. Open against Medvedev, where he just never showed up. It was bizarre. He just never showed up, and then almost same thing in the quarterfinals against Australia, where he kind of just didn't show up against Zverev in the quarterfinal. I thought it was the same thing, especially against Sinner, who, I mean, kind of, it doesn't really have his number. I think Alcaraz leads the head-to-head 5-4 now, but Sinner plays Alcaraz very well, and I thought at the start of that match, it was like, yeah, Alcaraz, he's down and out. I think Sinner has this, and then he found a way to win. Sinner had some issues. Alcaraz had some issues. It was a very weird match, and I'll get into more of that later. And that's also part of my final prediction. But Alcaraz surprised me with his just just how he fought back in that match, kind of compared to the last two majors for him. And then this could go either way. You could say this player is also a loser for their performance at the French Open, but there was more good than bad, I think, with Rafael Nadal and his performance at the French Open. Obviously, he lost in straight sets in round one, so how could he possibly be a winner? How's it possible? Well, he looked good. He looked better than I think a lot of us thought he would. He was very confident in practice. I think he would have beat, man, like nearly almost everyone else in the draw on that day. And he was only going to get better. And I think the main reason I put him on this was because it feels like he's going to play another French Open. It feels like that wasn't the last. Just based off of what he was saying in his press conferences and his interviews. And they didn't have a ceremony for him once he lost. It feels like he's not done. He's obviously going to play the Olympics this year. It looks like he's going to skip Wimbledon and then play the Olympics, maybe the U.S. Open, we don't know, and Laver Cup. But I think he'll be back next year at the French, and maybe he can get a better draw. And I think physically maybe he can be better. Maybe he can have more matches in. Like maybe Nadal's not done, and that's why I put him in the winners category. I think it seemed like after Rome, it was really going to be a farewell, but it wasn't. Okay, now I'm going to go on to the French Open losers. Okay, so I have 3 for my list here. I have Tsitsipas. He made the quarterfinal, good for him, but for him, I mean, I wouldn't say he's good enough for it to be slam or bust, but it's what he wants the most. It's the only thing he really hasn't achieved. Maybe he hasn't won the Olympics, but he's won the ATP finals. He's won a few Masters 1000s. He's been like world number 3. Like a slam is kind of his, it's what he needs to be considered one of those generational players, which maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But anytime he falls short, I think, especially at this tournament, because it's his best chance every year, is a bit of a disappointment. And he didn't really improve against Alcaraz. He got smoked again. I think Alcaraz played a very, very, very good match, better than he played against Sinner, but part of that's just because Sinner made him do different things, and that's why he wasn't as sharp against Sinner. I mean, it's credit to Sinner. Tsitsipas wasn't able to do that against Alcaraz. It's why Alcaraz looked so good. So I'd call him a loser for that. It sounds harsh, call him a loser, but in terms of the tournament, I'd say he was a loser. Rublev is the next one. And I just put him here. He doesn't have the biggest slam expectations like ever, because he's never made a semi. But if he doesn't reach the quarters, it's a bit of a disappointment for him because obviously he gets there all the time. And he won Monte Carlo, I believe. And that is why I think it's a disappointment because he won a Masters 1000 on clay. If you're one of those guys, you have a bit of a higher expectation. Like Tsitsipas did the same thing, and then he lost to Arnaldi, which Arnaldi was playing great. He's an up and comer. He looks very very solid, but it was also the temper tantrum that Rublev threw and just everything around that. It was like, dude, this was not a good French Open for you. Like you needed to win that match and make the quarter against Tsitsipas, or no, make the round of 16 against Tsitsipas, I believe, and then try to get to that quarter against Alcaraz. And you beat Alcaraz earlier this clay season, so yeah, it's a shame. But now I'm gonna go to the number one loser. It sounds horrible, but number one loser of the French Open, I'd say Novak Djokovic. Um, I mean, he didn't have the best form coming in, obviously. I think that was well documented. And he just he looked good in stretches, but then like he looked horrible in stretches. He didn't look great at times against Musetti. Obviously that match going way into the night. And then obviously looked great in the first set against Cerundolo, but the knee issue happened and he was obviously not the same player. I guess he already had the knee issue, and that could explain a lot of this poor form for him. So hopefully he can get that fixed up. But the moral of the story is if Djokovic isn't in the final, at least it's a disappointment for him. It's a big disappointment for him. And yeah, to not even get to play a quarterfinal match, that's going to be an extremely disappointing result for Djokovic. I do think, I mean, after seeing Alcaraz in the semi, I think he could have still won the tournament with the Cerundolo level. Seriously, I think you could always get by Casper, and then Zverev, he has his number in slams. Not all big matches, though. Zverev's beaten him in the Olympics and the ATP finals, but in best of five, Djokovic has Zverev's number. And then if Alcaraz just has one of those crazy, wild, horrible sets like the first set against Sinner, it's like Djokovic can use that and turn it into more and possibly win. So I think Djokovic seriously could have won the title, but obviously the knee was only going to get worse and he had to rest it, and that's why he withdrew. And yeah, he wanted to get that surgery done ASAP, but yeah, I think it was a pretty big disappointment for him. Okay, I'm going to do like where I was right and wrong on this French Open. So I talked about a little. I was wrong in the semi. I thought Sinner was going to win the match, even on paper, especially. And then the first set, I thought it was over. And then Alcaraz kind of changed the script. I thought it was going to be the same story, 3 majors in a row for him. And I was going to be super concerned if it was, because he couldn't afford to lose to Sinner on clay at a major. He couldn't. Because I think if Sinner won that match, I'd say he's ahead of Alcaraz in terms of like career. Because Sinner probably gets his second major. He's better than him on clay with that. Like, it would have been unacceptable almost for Alcaraz to lose that match. He had to win that match, and he did. He's a great champion. That match was so interesting to me because it was the first time they played both as major champs in a major, because they did play that best of 3 match a while back, but it was the first time in a major they played both as slam champs, and that means something. And Alcaraz said, hey, I'm still here, and he got the win. Um, I think so. I was right. I predicted this isn't documented anywhere, but I predicted Alcaraz Zverev in the final. I had Zverev winning, which I don't anymore. And then I was right about. I was watching Served with Andy Roddick, and he was talking about how Medvedev was going to beat De Minaur in the round of 16, and I was like, "There's no chance." De Minaur has that matchup on clay all day, and he did. I was so right about. I was so heavy on De Minaur in that round of 16 against Medvedev, and he pulled through. But that's like just tooting my own horn a little. Okay, I'll do the prediction for the final. I have Carlos Alcaraz winning his 3rd major. So he's gonna have 3 of the 4, which is crazy. I have him beating Sasha Zverev in 4 sets. So I have Zverev still with no majors, which, I mean, this isn't his best chance. Obviously, the final against Team was. But this, if he loses, it's going to be tough one to swallow. But he's still going to have more chances. I believe he's just so talented in that way. I don't know what I'm saying. I was about to sneeze. Anyway, my bet, because I was looking at this earlier, I might put the thing up too when I'm editing this. Alcaraz minus 1.5 sets, so that would be winning 3-1 or 3-0. Like, that's what it would be to cover. That bet is minus 125. And that lines up with my prediction because I have him beating Zverev in 4. I just think, obviously, Zverev has a winning head-to-head against Alcaraz, which is scary if you're Alcaraz. But I've just watched Zverev play this tournament, and I don't think it's good enough to beat Alcaraz in 3 sets. If Alcaraz was going to lose, he would have lost against Sinner. If this was the same Alcaraz that lost to Zverev in Australia and Medvedev at the U.S. Open, he would have lost to Sinner. It would have, because both those matches went a very similar way. The semi and then the quarterfinal in Australia. And Alcaraz managed to turn this semifinal around in a different way. And if he was going to lose to anyone, it was going to be Sinner anyway. If he was going to lose, he would have lost to Sinner on Friday, and he didn't. He pulled through. And if the Alcaraz that can fight through a match like he did against Djokovic in the Wimbledon final, and he did against Ruud in the 2022 U.S. Open final, if that Alcaraz is showing up, which all signs indicate that's the Alcaraz that's here in Paris this year, he's not losing to Zverev. I only have him losing a set because he's had these moments where he just can't find the court like he did in the first set and like kind of in the middle of that third set. And physically, that's another question too. Zverev, he's played a lot more tennis, but physically he's more reliable than Alcaraz. But I think Alcaraz is still going to get it done in 4. I just don't think Zverev's tennis has been impressive enough in the last... I mean, the Nadal match, he was lights out. But since then, I don't think his tennis has been impressive enough to make me believe he can beat the Alcaraz I'm describing. So that's why I have Alcaraz winning the French Open, winning his 3rd major, and just continuing his greatness, man. So yeah, that's all I have for this episode. We'll see if I'm right, and I'll be back soon with some predictions and stuff. See you guys.